Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked across his vast wheat fields. The twin suns of Kepler 442b beat down mercilessly on the golden grain that stretched to the horizon. He had been farming this remote planet for 12 years now, ever since the Great Colony Wars ended and left him with nowhere else to go. The nearest human settlement was 300 miles away, and Marcus preferred it that way. After losing his family in the war, solitude had become his closest companion. His only visitors were the occasional supply drones that dropped off equipment and picked up his grain shipments every few months. Today felt different, though. The morning had started with strange readings on his atmospheric scanner. High-energy signatures moving through the upper atmosphere, then sudden crashes about 50 miles to the north. Marcus had seen enough combat to know the difference between natural phenomena and something else entirely. As he climbed down from his harvester, a low rumble echoed across the plains. Not thunder. The sky was clear except for the usual orange-tinted clouds. This sound was deeper, more organic. It made the hair on his arm stand up. Marcus grabbed his plasma rifle from the equipment shed and jumped into his all-terrain vehicle. Whatever had crashed might be dangerous, but it might also be someone in need of help. Despite his preference for isolation, he couldn't ignore the possibility that another living being was hurt. The drive north took him through increasingly rocky terrain. The fertile farmland gave way to jagged cliffs and deep canyons carved by ancient rivers. His scanner showed the energy signatures getting stronger as he approached a particularly deep ravine. He parked at the edge and peered down. At the bottom, partially hidden by fallen rocks and twisted metal, lay what looked like a small spacecraft. But as his eyes adjusted to the shadows, he realized it wasn't a ship at all. It was something alive. Two creatures lay motionless among the debris. They were unlike anything in the galactic databases he'd studied. Each was about the size of a large dog, with sleek, muscular bodies covered in pristine white scales that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. Most striking were their wings, translucent membranes stretched between delicate bone structures, now torn and bleeding. Dragons. They looked exactly like the mythical creatures from old Earth stories, except these were real and they were hurt badly. Marcus secured his climbing gear and rappelled down into the ravine. As he got closer, he could see that both creatures were breathing, but barely. Their white scales were stained with blue blood, and one had a deep gash across its flank. The smaller of the two, perhaps a juvenile, had its wing bent at an unnatural angle. When Marcus approached, the larger dragon's eyes snapped open. They were the most beautiful shade of violet he'd ever seen, but filled with pain and fear. The creature tried to stand, positioning itself protectively over the smaller one, but collapsed with a weak cry that sounded almost like a whimper. "Easy there," Marcus said softly, holstering his rifle. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon's eyes tracked his every movement, intelligent and wary. Marcus could see the calculation happening behind those violet orbs. This was no mere animal. This was a thinking, feeling being making a decision about whether to trust him. Marcus slowly removed his medical kit from his belt. He'd treated plenty of wounded soldiers during the war, and while these weren't humans, anatomy was anatomy. The bleeding needed to stop first. "I know you don't understand me," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "But I want to help. You're both hurt pretty bad." He approached with his hands visible, moving slowly. The larger dragon tensed but didn't flee. Perhaps it understood that running wasn't an option in their condition. Marcus began with the smaller dragon, gently examining the twisted wing. The bone wasn't broken, just dislocated. He'd seen similar injuries in bird-like creatures during his exploration of other worlds. With careful pressure, he popped the joint back into place. The little dragon cried out, but it was more surprise than pain. The larger dragon watched intently as Marcus worked, its fear gradually giving way to something that looked like hope. When he moved to treat the gash on the bigger dragon's side, it actually shifted to give him better access. "That's it," Marcus murmured, cleaning the wound with antiseptic. "You're starting to trust me, aren't you?" The sun was setting by the time Marcus finished treating their injuries. The dragons were stable but exhausted. The smaller one had fallen asleep, its head resting against the larger one's neck. The bigger dragon's eyes were heavy with fatigue, but it continued to watch Marcus. "You can't stay down here," Marcus said, looking around the ravine. "It gets cold at night, and there are predators in these canyons." He made a decision that would change his life forever. Loading both dragons carefully into his vehicle wasn't easy. They were heavier than they looked, but he managed it. The larger dragon seemed to understand what was happening and didn't resist. The drive back to the farm was slow and careful. Every bump in the road made Marcus wince, worried about aggravating their injuries. But both dragons remained calm, the smaller one sleeping soundly while the larger one gazed out at the passing landscape with curious eyes. Marcus's farmhouse was simple but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen and a large living area with a stone fireplace. He'd built it himself after arriving on the planet, designed for solitude and function rather than style. He made a soft bed of blankets near the fireplace and carefully transferred both dragons onto it. The larger dragon sniffed the air cautiously, taking in all the new scents, while the smaller one continued sleeping. "I don't know what you are or where you came from," Marcus said as he prepared a simple meal in the kitchen. "But you're safe here. I promise." As if understanding his words, the larger dragon settled down beside its companion and finally allowed its eyes to close. For the first time in years, Marcus's house didn't feel empty. He had no idea that he'd just become a father to 2 of the last surviving members of an ancient and powerful race. He had no idea that this simple act of compassion would eventually reshape the balance of power in the entire galaxy. All he knew was that 2 beings had needed help, and he'd given it. Sometimes that's how the most extraordinary stories begin, with ordinary kindness in the face of the unknown. Marcus woke before dawn to the sound of movement in his living room. For a moment he'd forgotten about his unusual guests. Then he heard a soft chittering sound like birds talking to each other, and everything came flooding back. He found both dragons awake, the smaller one exploring the room with careful steps while the larger one watched protectively. Their wounds looked much better in the morning light. Whatever these creatures were, they healed remarkably fast. "Good morning," Marcus said quietly. Both dragons turned to look at him, their violet eyes alert and curious. "How are you feeling?" The larger dragon made a sound that was almost musical, a series of tones that seemed deliberately communicative. Marcus got the distinct impression it was trying to thank him. "You're welcome," he replied, feeling only slightly foolish for talking to creatures that couldn't understand him. "Are you hungry?" At the word hungry, both dragons perked up noticeably. Marcus smiled. Apparently some concepts were universal. He'd been wondering what to feed them. His emergency supplies included protein bars and synthetic nutrients, but somehow he doubted that's what these creatures normally ate. On impulse, he opened a can of the processed meat he kept for special occasions. The moment the smell hit the air, both dragons became very interested indeed. Their nostrils flared, and the smaller one actually took a few steps toward the kitchen. Marcus placed small portions of the meat on 2 plates and set them down. Both dragons approached cautiously, sniffed the offerings, then began eating with obvious enthusiasm. Whatever else they were definitely carnivores. While they ate, Marcus studied them more carefully. In daylight, their scales were even more remarkable. Not just white, but iridescent, shifting between pearl and silver depending on the angle. Their wings, now properly folded, showed intricate patterns of veins and membranes. Most fascinating were their eyes, which seemed to hold depths of intelligence that made Marcus increasingly uncomfortable with thinking of them as animals. The smaller dragon finished eating first and began exploring again. It was definitely the more curious of the 2, investigating everything with careful sniffs and gentle touches of its snout. When it discovered Marcus's bookshelf, it spent several minutes examining the volumes with what looked like genuine interest. "You like books?" Marcus asked, amused. The dragon looked at him and made a soft sound that seemed almost questioning. On impulse, Marcus pulled down an old picture book from Earth, one of the few personal items he'd kept from his previous life. It was a children's book about animals, filled with colorful illustrations. He opened it on the floor, and both dragons immediately gathered around. They studied each page intently as Marcus turned them, their eyes tracking the images with unmistakable recognition. When he reached a page showing earthbirds in flight, both dragons spread their wings slightly and made excited chirping sounds. "You understand these are pictures?" Marcus said, amazed. "You know what they represent?" The larger dragon looked directly at him and nodded. Actually nodded like a human would. Marcus sat back, stunned. These weren't just intelligent creatures, they were trying to communicate with him. The question was, how much did they actually understand? He spent the morning running simple tests. He'd point to objects and name them, and the dragons would listen intently. When he said water and pointed to his glass, the smaller dragon immediately went to the water bowl he'd set out and took a drink. When he said book and pointed to the shelf, the larger dragon went and touched one of the volumes with its snout. By afternoon, Marcus was convinced he was dealing with beings that were not only intelligent, but were actively trying to learn his language. The implications made his head spin. He was so absorbed in these experiments that he almost missed the sound of approaching engines. When he finally heard them, his blood went cold. The dragons heard it too and immediately became agitated, the larger one positioning itself defensively in front of the smaller. Marcus grabbed his binoculars and looked out the window. 3 military hovercraft were approaching from the south, flying in tight formation. They bore the insignia of the Terran Colonial Authority, the same organization that had been responsible for the camps, the forced relocations, the systematic oppression that had led to the colony wars. "Hide," Marcus said urgently to the dragons, though he doubted they understood. But the larger dragon seemed to grasp the danger immediately. It nudged the smaller one, and both creatures quickly moved toward the back of the house. The hovercraft landed in Marcus's yard with military precision. 6 soldiers in full combat armor emerged, their weapons ready but not quite raised. Marcus recognized the type. Colonial Enforcement Division, the TCA's Special Forces unit. Marcus stepped onto his porch, keeping his hands visible but ready to go for his rifle if necessary.
"Can I help you, gentlemen?"
The squad leader, a lieutenant by his insignia, stepped forward. "Marcus Chen, formerly Staff Sergeant 42nd Colonial Defense Regiment?" "That's me. What do you want?" "We detected unusual energy signatures in this area yesterday. Our sensors indicate they originated from something that crashed about 50 miles north of here. Did you see anything unusual?" Marcus kept his expression neutral. "I saw some lights in the sky yesterday evening. Figured it was probably meteorites or space debris. Happens sometimes out here. You didn't investigate?" "Why would I? I'm a farmer, not a scavenger." The lieutenant studied him for a long moment. Marcus could feel the man's suspicion, but there was nothing to see. He'd hidden the dragon's makeshift bed and cleaned up any evidence of their presence while they'd retreated to the back room. "Mind if we take a look around?" the lieutenant asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Do I have a choice?" "Not really." The soldiers spread out, searching his house and outbuildings with professional thoroughness. Marcus's heart pounded as they approached the back room where the dragons were hiding. But the door was closed and there was no sound from within. After 20 minutes of searching, they found nothing. The lieutenant looked frustrated but not surprised. "If you see anything unusual," he said, handing Marcus a communication device, "contact us immediately. The TCA is prepared to offer substantial rewards for information about anomalous discoveries." "I'll keep that in mind," Marcus said. After the soldiers left, Marcus waited a full hour before calling out to the dragons. They emerged from the back room looking shaken but unharmed. The larger dragon came directly to Marcus and pressed its head against his hand in what was unmistakably a gesture of gratitude. "They were looking for you, weren't they?" Marcus said quietly. "Someone knows you're here, or at least suspects it." The dragon's violet eyes met his, and Marcus saw fear there, not just for itself, but for its smaller companion. In that moment, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. "Don't worry," he said firmly. "I won't let them take you. Whatever you are, wherever you came from, you're under my protection now." The dragon seemed to understand because some of the tension left its posture. The smaller one, perhaps sensing the emotional exchange, came over and curled up against both of them. As Marcus sat there with 2 alien beings who had somehow become his responsibility, he realized his quiet life was over. The TCA would be back, and next time they might not be so easily fooled. But looking into those intelligent, trusting eyes, he knew he'd made the right choice. He had no idea he'd just declared war on the most powerful organization in human space. All he knew was that these creatures needed him, and he would not fail them. 3 weeks passed without another visit from the TCA, but Marcus knew they hadn't given up. He'd intercepted enough military communications during his farming years to recognize a search pattern when he saw one. Scout ships passed overhead daily now, their sensors sweeping the landscape in ever-widening circles. The dragons had settled into life on the farm with surprising ease. Marcus had named them Storm and Whisper, Storm being the larger, more protective one, and Whisper the smaller, more curious one. Both had shown remarkable intelligence and an almost supernatural ability to learn. Storm had figured out how to open doors within a week. Whisper had somehow learned to operate the basic controls of Marcus's tablet computer, spending hours looking at pictures and videos with intense fascination. Most amazingly, both were beginning to understand and even attempt to speak human language. It started with simple words. Marcus came first, though it sounded more like Marcus when they said it. Then water and food and home. Their voices were musical, almost singing, but unmistakably attempting human speech. Marcus was working in the fields when everything changed. He was checking the irrigation systems when he heard Storm calling his name from the house. Not the usual chirping call, but actual words. Marcus, come quick! Whisper heard. Marcus dropped his tools and ran. He found Storm in the living room, agitated and clearly distressed. Whisper was lying on their bed of blankets, breathing heavily, with what looked like scorch marks on the white scales along one wing. What happened? Marcus asked, kneeling beside the injured dragon. Storm's response came in broken but understandable words. Skyfire came from clouds. Whisper tried to catch, got burned. Marcus looked up at the ceiling, understanding flooding through him. There had been a brief electrical storm that morning. Nothing unusual for the planet's volatile atmosphere. But apparently Whisper had tried to interact with the lightning in some way. As Marcus treated the burns with his medical supplies, he noticed something strange. The scorch marks weren't random. They formed patterns on Whisper's scales, almost like circuitry. And as he watched, those patterns began to glow with a soft blue light. Storm, Marcus said carefully. Has this happened before? The glowing? Storm nodded solemnly. When we were... Before Crash, we could make Skyfire dance. Now Whisper learning again. Skyfire, Marcus repeated. Then it hit him. You mean electricity? Lightning? Yes, Storm said, the word clear and precise. We are storm riders, sky dancers, before the bad ones came. Marcus sat back, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. These weren't just intelligent dragons. They were beings with natural control over electrical energy. And someone had been hunting them. Storm, he said gently. What are the bad ones? The ones who made you crash? Storm's eyes darkened with what Marcus was learning to recognize as remembered pain. Metal ships, dark hearts. They take our people, put them in cages, make them fight for human entertainment. They want our power. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The TCA wasn't just looking for these dragons out of scientific curiosity. They were hunting them for exploitation. The anomalous discoveries the lieutenant had mentioned weren't meant for study. They were meant for enslavement. How many of your people are there? Marcus asked. We're many, Storm said sadly. Now, maybe few dozen, hidden in far places. Whisper and Storm. We are younglings. Parents sent us away when hunters came. Marcus felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. These weren't just intelligent beings, they were children. Orphaned children who had been hunted across the galaxy by people who wanted to use their abilities for profit. Well, he said firmly, you're safe now. Both of you. No one's going to put you in cages or make you fight. Whisper's eyes fluttered open, the burns on the wing already beginning to heal. Marcus, the smaller dragon whispered. Are you our new father? The question stopped Marcus cold. He'd been thinking of himself as their protector, their caretaker. But the word father carried implications he hadn't considered. Yet looking at these two young beings who had lost everything and somehow found their way to him, the answer seemed obvious. Yes, he said quietly, if you want me to be. Both dragons made sounds of joy, musical trills that filled the room with warmth. Storm nuzzled against Marcus's shoulder while Whisper, despite the injuries, managed to curl up in his lap. We choose you, Storm said with careful dignity. You're a good father. You save us, care for us, protect us. We are family now. Marcus felt tears he hadn't shed since the war began to fall. He'd thought his family was gone forever, destroyed by the same conflicts that had created the TCA and drove him to this isolated world. But sometimes family finds you in the most unexpected ways. That evening, as the dragon slept peacefully by the fireplace, Marcus made plans. The TCA would eventually find them. It was only a matter of time. When they did, he needed to be ready. He spent the night modifying his farm's defensive systems. What had been simple perimeter sensors became a sophisticated early warning network. His emergency supplies were moved to hidden caches around the property. Most importantly, he began preparing escape routes and safe houses in the deep canyon country to the north. But Marcus was thinking too small. He was planning to protect 2 dragons, not understanding that he was harboring the hope of an entire species. He had no idea that Storm and Whisper weren't just ordinary younglings, but the children of the Dragon High Council. Beings whose parents had ruled the electrical storms of a dozen worlds before the TCA's hunting fleets had scattered them to the stars. He had no idea that somewhere, in the depths of space, desperate adult dragons were searching for their lost princes. He had no idea that his simple farm would soon become the focal point of a resistance movement that would challenge human supremacy in the galaxy. All he knew was that he had a family again, and he would die before he let anyone hurt them. As Storm and Whisper slept, small arcs of electricity danced between their scales, growing stronger each day. Their power was returning, and with it, the attention of forces far more dangerous than a few TCA soldiers. The quiet farmer who had wanted only to be left alone was about to become the most wanted man in human space. But looking at his sleeping children, because that's what they were now, his children, Marcus wouldn't change a thing. 2 months after the dragon's arrival, Marcus's quiet life ended with the sound of orbital bombardment platforms powering up in the upper atmosphere. The deep thrumming vibration that shook the farmhouse was unmistakable to anyone who'd served in the colony wars. Storm and Whisper felt it too, their scales beginning to glow with agitated energy. Both dragons had grown considerably, now the size of large horses, and their control over electricity had developed beyond Marcus's wildest imagination. They could power the entire farm with their bioelectric fields, communicate through electromagnetic pulses across vast distances, and most impressively, they had learned to cloak themselves from electronic sensors. "Father," Storm said, using the word that now came naturally, "big ships come from sky. Many soldiers. They bring cage makers." Marcus looked through his enhanced binoculars at the fleet descending through the atmosphere. Not just TCA enforcement ships this time. These were full military vessels, including what looked like a research ship equipped with containment facilities. Someone had decided the gloves were coming off. How did they find us? Marcus wondered aloud, then saw Whisper's guilty expression. "What did you do?" "Yesterday, when lightning storm came." Whisper's voice was small. "I called to sky friends, made light patterns in clouds. Maybe someone saw." Marcus felt a chill. Whisper's developing abilities had been creating beautiful light displays during storms, dancing with natural lightning in ways that looked like pure joy. He should have realized that such displays would be visible from orbit. "It's not your fault," he assured the young dragon. "You were just being yourself. But now we need to go." The family had practiced evacuation procedures many times, but this was different. The approaching fleet was large enough to glass the entire continent if they wanted to. Running wouldn't be enough this time. Storm seemed to read his thoughts. "Father, we not run anymore. We fight." "You're not ready for that kind of fight," Marcus said firmly. "Neither am I." "We are," said a new voice from outside. Marcus spun around to find 3 adult dragons landing in his yard. Each was massive, easily twice the size of Storm and Whisper, with scales that shifted between colors like oil on water. Their presence charged the air with such electricity that Marcus's hair stood on end. Storm and Whisper cried out in joy, rushing to greet the newcomers. The reunion was emotional, deep harmonious sounds that Marcus felt in his bones, combined with light displays that turned the afternoon air into an aurora of colors. The largest of the adult dragons approached Marcus directly. When it spoke, its voice was deeper than Storm's, with harmonics that seemed to resonate in multiple dimensions. "Human Marcus Chen," it said with formal precision. "I am Thunderheart, Stormcaller of the Western Spiral, High Council member of the People of the Lightning. You have protected my son and his clutch brother. I am in your debt." Marcus blinked. "Storm is your son?" "Indeed. And Whisper is heir to the Cloudwalker lineage, adopted into our family when his birth parents were taken by the Hunters." Thunderheart's eyes, ancient and wise, studied Marcus intently. "You have raised them well, human father. They speak of you with love and respect." "I just did what anyone would do," Marcus said, feeling overwhelmed. "No," said another adult dragon. landing gracefully beside Thunderheart. This one was slighter in build, but radiated an aura of controlled power. Most of your species would have sold them to the TCA for the bounty. You chose differently. I am Stormweaver, Whisper's birth ant. You have given us hope that not all humans are enemies. The third dragon, darker than the others with scales that seemed to absorb light, remained silent but watchful. The fleet comes, Thunderheart observed, looking skyward. 12 ships, including 2 equipped for specimen containment. They believe they hunt lost younglings. They do not know the High Council has arrived. Marcus felt a surge of hope, but it was tempered by reality. There are thousands of soldiers up there, plus orbital weapons platforms. Can 3 dragons really make a difference? Thunderheart's laugh was like controlled thunder. 3? Look again, human father. Marcus raised his binoculars and scanned the sky. At first he saw nothing. Then his enhanced optics caught them. Shapes moving between the clouds, barely visible against the storm fronts gathering on the horizon. Not 3 dragons, dozens. The children you protected, Stormweaver explained, are not ordinary younglings. Storm is the heir to the Thunder Crown, destined to lead our people in the next generation. Whisper carries the bloodline of the first Storm Riders, the founders of our civilization. When they disappeared, every clan sent searchers. When we learned they were safe and loved by a human, every clan sent warriors. Marcus looked at Storm and Whisper with new eyes. All this time he'd thought he was protecting 2 orphaned creatures. Instead, he'd been raising dragon royalty. Why didn't you tell me? He asked Storm. His son looked embarrassed. At first, we too hurt to speak proper. Later, we like being your children, not princes. You love us for who we are, not what we might become. The first TCA ships were breaking through the lower atmosphere now, their weapons charging. Marcus could see dropships preparing to launch assault teams. What's the plan? He asked Thunderheart. First, we ensure the safety of our younglings and their human father, the dragon leader replied. Then we send a message that will echo across the galaxy. The people of the lightning are no longer prey. The dark dragon spoke for the first time, its voice like distant storms. The hunting days are ending. Marcus felt the truth of those words in his bones. Whatever was about to happen would change everything. The quiet farmer who had wanted only to be left alone was about to witness the first battle in a war that would reshape the balance of power between species. But as Storm and Whisper pressed close to him, their scales warm with bioelectric energy, Marcus realized he was ready for whatever came next. These weren't just dragons anymore, they were his family. And families protect each other no matter the odds. Above them, the first TCA dropships launched their assault, expecting to find a lone farmer and 2 helpless creatures. Instead, they were flying into the ancestral hunting grounds of beings who had mastered the power of storms, when humanity was still learning to use fire. The dragons were done hiding. The real war was about to begin. The battle began at sunset, and it was like nothing Marcus had ever seen, even in the bloodiest campaigns of the colony wars. The TCA dropships descended in perfect formation, their pilots confident they were facing minimal resistance. The first indication they were wrong came when the planet's entire electromagnetic spectrum suddenly went wild. Communication systems shrieked with interference, navigation computers spun wildly, and weapon targeting systems simply shut down. Storm jamming, Thunderheart explained calmly as chaos erupted in the sky above them. The youngling's first lesson: always blind your enemies before you strike. Storm and Whisper stood side by side, their scales blazing with electric fire as they poured energy into the planet's upper atmosphere. What they were doing was beyond Marcus's understanding, but the results were undeniable. The TCA fleet was flying blind. The adult dragons launched themselves skyward like living lightning bolts, their wings crackling with bioelectric fields that ionized the air around them. They moved faster than anything Marcus had ever seen fly, reaching the first wave of dropships before the human pilots even knew they were under attack. Stormweaver struck first, wrapping herself around a troop transport and discharging enough electricity to fry every electronic system aboard. The ship fell like a stone, its crew unconscious from the electromagnetic pulse. No one died. The dragons were being remarkably merciful. The dark dragon, who Marcus learned was called Void Whisper, demonstrated why dragons had once been feared across the galaxy. Moving through the formation like smoke given form, it touched each ship just long enough to deliver a precise electrical surge that disabled engines without harming the crew. Within minutes, 12 dropships were making emergency landings across the plains. But the real display of power came from Thunderheart. The Dragon Leader flew directly toward the orbital platforms, climbing higher and higher until it was just a glowing speck against the stars. Then it spread its wings and roared. The sound that echoed across the planet wasn't just noise. It was pure electromagnetic energy, a storm call that reached into space itself. Lightning began to dance between Thunderheart's wings, growing brighter and more intense until the dragon looked like a miniature star. Then it released that energy in a focused pulse that struck every orbital platform simultaneously. Marcus watched through his enhanced binoculars as the mighty weapons of the TCA fleet simply went dark. One by one, the orbital platforms lost power, their weapons offline, their crews struggling with dead computers and failing life support systems. Impossible, Marcus breathed. One being can't generate that much power. Not one, Storm said proudly. All of us together channeled through Thunder, Father. We are connected, all people of lightning. What one feels, all feel. What one knows, all know. What one can do, all can do if we unite our spirits. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. The dragons weren't just individual creatures. They were part of a collective consciousness, a species-wide network that could share power, knowledge, and abilities across any distance. No wonder the TCA wanted to capture them. A being that could tap into that kind of distributed processing power would be worth more than entire star systems. The battle was over in less than an hour, but its aftermath would reshape galactic politics forever. Every TCA ship was disabled but intact, every crew member alive but thoroughly defeated. The dragons had demonstrated power that made human technology look primitive, while showing restraint that proved their moral superiority. As the adult dragons returned to the farm, Marcus saw figures approaching across the fields. TCA soldiers, but not in attack formation. They were walking slowly, many with their hands raised. Led by a figure Marcus recognized, the lieutenant who had questioned him weeks earlier. Permission to approach, the lieutenant called out when he was still 100 yards away. Thunderheart landed beside Marcus, still crackling with residual energy. You may approach, human soldier, but know that our patience has limits. The lieutenant came closer, his face a mixture of fear and awe. Behind him, Marcus could see other soldiers, all looking like they just witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the universe. I am Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, the officer said formally. I command the 7th Colonial Enforcement Division. I've been authorized by TCA High Command to negotiate terms of withdrawal. Withdrawal? Marcus asked, surprised. Harrison nodded grimly. Sir, what just happened up there? It's being broadcast across the entire TCA communication network. Every military installation in human space just watched one creature disable an entire orbital fleet. The political implications are... He paused, searching for words. Revolutionary. Thunderheart studied the human officer with ancient eyes. Your species has hunted mine for generations. You have enslaved our younglings, forced them to fight for your entertainment, experimented on them in your laboratories. Why should we not simply eliminate you as a threat? Harrison swallowed hard but maintained his composure. Because, sir, that's not who you are. You could have killed every person in my fleet, but you didn't. You could have destroyed our ships, but you left them intact. You're not conquerors, you're protectors. That's why the TCA is prepared to offer terms. What terms? Marcus asked, stepping forward. Full recognition of dragon sovereignty, Harrison replied. Immediate cessation of all hunting activities. Return of all captured dragons currently in TCA custody. Establishment of formal diplomatic relations between the Terran Colonial Authority and the... What do you call yourselves? We are the people of the lightning, Stormweaver answered. Children of the storm, riders of the thunder, keepers of the skyfire. Understood. The TCA is prepared to recognize the people of the lightning as a sovereign species with full rights under galactic law. All we ask is that this demonstration of power not be repeated against civilian targets. Marcus looked at the dragons, realizing that a moment of historical significance was unfolding. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting, and it had started on his quiet farm with 2 injured younglings who had taught him to be a father. Thunderheart was quiet for a long moment, consulting with the other adult dragons through their electromagnetic connection. Finally, the great dragon spoke. We will consider your terms, human Harrison. But know this, we do not forgive easily and we do not forget. Your people have caused great pain to ours. Trust must be earned, not granted. I understand, Harrison replied. The TCA is prepared to begin that process immediately. We have other concerns that make your alliance valuable. What concerns? Marcus asked, his military instincts picking up on the tension in the officer's voice. Harrison hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. 3 months ago, we lost contact with the Outer Rim colonies. Not destroyed, lost. Ships go in, they don't come out. No distress signals, no wreckage, nothing. Something is out there. Something that makes our weapons useless and our sensors blind. We need allies who can fight in ways we can't. The adult dragons exchanged looks that Marcus was learning to recognize as rapid communication through their bioelectric network. Whatever they were discussing, it was urgent. The Void Hunters, Void Whisper said quietly, speaking for the second time. They have returned. You know what's happening to our colonies? Harrison asked urgently. An old enemy, Thunderheart replied grimly. Ancient beyond your understanding, from the spaces between stars. They consume electromagnetic energy, devour the life force of technological civilizations. We fought them once long ago and barely survived. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying there's something out there that feeds on technology? Not just technology, Stormweaver corrected. They feed on the electrical patterns that create consciousness itself. They turn living beings into empty shells, worlds into dead rocks. We thought they were gone, banished to the deep void between galaxies. But they've found a way back, Storm said, his young voice heavy with inherited racial memory. Father, this is why the clans really came. Not just for Whisper and me, but because the old warnings are singing in the storm paths again. Harrison looked between Marcus and the dragons, clearly trying to process information that challenged his understanding of the universe. If these Void Hunters are what's attacking our colonies, then humanity needs your help. Whatever our past conflicts, we need to work together now. Perhaps, Thunderheart mused, but first you must prove your sincerity. Release all captured dragons immediately. Withdraw all hunting fleets. Grant full amnesty to Marcus Chen for his protection of our younglings. And, Harrison asked, sensing there was more, and you must accept that things have changed. The people of the Lightning are no longer hiding. We will establish territories in the outer systems, places where our younglings can grow and learn without fear. Any human ship that enters these territories without permission will be turned away. Any ship that comes hunting will not leave. Harrison nodded slowly. I'll need to communicate with TCA High Command, but I believe these terms can be accepted. The galaxy is about to face a threat that makes our species' conflicts seem trivial. As the negotiations continued, Marcus found himself standing with Storm and Whisper, watching the adults reshape the political landscape of human space. His children had grown so much in 6 months after the battle that changed everything. Marcus stood on the bridge of the dragon ship Stormheart, watching the void between galaxies where something ancient and hungry was stirring. His quiet farming days seemed like another lifetime now. The ship itself was a marvel that defied human understanding of physics. Grown rather than built, it was a living fusion of dragon biotechnology and crystallized lightning, capable of traveling faster than light by riding electromagnetic currents that existed in dimensions humans couldn't even detect. Storm and Whisper had grown even larger, now approaching adult size, their scales shifting to deeper colors as they matured. Storms were becoming a rich silver blue, while Whispers remained pearl white but now held rainbow undertones that danced in certain light. More importantly, their powers had developed to levels that amazed even the adult dragons. The probe signals have stopped, reported Captain Skyrender, the dragon commanding the joint human-dragon fleet that had assembled to investigate the lost colonies. Whatever happened to the TCA research vessels, it happened quickly. Marcus studied the tactical display, his military experience helping him interpret the scattered data. 3 human colonies had gone silent in the past month, each one vanishing without any distress signal or sign of struggle. Ships sent to investigate simply disappeared. Father, Storm said, approaching with the formal bearing he'd adopted since joining the War Council. The storm paths are wrong in this space. They sing of hunger and emptiness, of something that devours light itself. The Void Hunters, Whisper added, his voice carrying harmonics that made the humans on the bridge shiver. They are close now. We can feel them feeding. Marcus had learned much about these ancient enemies in recent months, The dragon's racial memory painted a picture of horrors from the dawn of galactic civilization. Entities that existed in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on the electromagnetic energy that powered both technology and consciousness itself. How did they return? Asked Admiral Rodriguez, the TCA commander, who had become an unlikely ally. Your people banished them eons ago. Thunderheart, present as both Marcus's family and the dragon representative to the Joint Command, rippled with colors that indicated deep concern. We did not banish them. We merely drove them back to the void between galaxies. We believed the barriers would hold forever. But someone opened a door, Marcus realized, pieces clicking together in his mind. The energy signatures we detected before the first colony went dark. They weren't natural phenomena. Correct, human father, Thunderheart confirmed grimly. Someone with knowledge of the old barriers deliberately weakened them. This invasion was invited. The implications sent a chill through everyone present. Bad enough to face an enemy from outside their galaxy, but knowing that someone had betrayed all sentient life to let them in was almost unbearable. Incoming transmission, announced the ship's communication officer, a young dragon whose scales sparkled with data streams. It's from the outer marker, boys. Something's coming through. The main display showed the edge of known space, where automated sentinel stations kept watch for threats from the intergalactic void. As they watched, one by one, the stations went dark. Then they saw them. Ships, if they could be called that, emerged from folds in space itself. They were wrong to look at, hurting the eyes and mind with geometries that shouldn't exist in normal dimensions. Darkness seemed to flow around them like liquid, and where they passed, the very stars seemed to dim. How many? Admiral Rodriguez asked, her voice tight with controlled fear. Scanning now, the communication officer replied, then stopped, staring at the readings. Admiral, there are thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. And behind them, something larger. The display zoomed out, revealing the true scope of the invasion. The Void Hunter fleet stretched across light years, a river of darkness flowing toward the galaxy's rim. And at its heart was something that defied description, a shape that seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once, pulling light and matter into itself like a cosmic wound. The Devourer, Thunderheart whispered, colors of ancient terror rippling across his scales, the hunger that consumes suns. We thought it was destroyed in the last war. Marcus felt his children press closer to him, their usual confidence shaken by the sight of racial nightmares made real. Around the bridge, both human and dragon crew members struggled to comprehend what they were facing. New contacts, the sensor operator called out. Ships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Configuration unknown. The display shifted to show sleek vessels appearing in precise formations. Their hulls were smooth and silver, marked with symbols that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. Those aren't human or dragon ships, Admiral Rodriguez observed. One of the newcomer vessels opened a communication channel. The voice that emerged was melodious but alien, with harmonics that suggested a non-human vocal structure. This is First Singer Harmony of the Depths, representing the Resonance Collective. We have come to honor the ancient packs. Thunderheart's scales flashed with surprised recognition. The singers. But they withdrew from galactic affairs millennia ago. As did we, the alien voice replied, somehow knowing it was being overheard. But the Void Hunters threaten all life, all consciousness, all harmony in the universe. The time of withdrawal is ended. More ships appeared, each group announcing themselves as representatives of species Marcus had never heard of. The Crystal Mines, the Phase Walkers, the Eternal Gardeners. Races that had retreated from galactic politics long before humans had learned to leave their homeworld. They're forming a battle line. Admiral Rodriguez reported with professional calm that didn't hide her awe. My God, how many species are out there? Many, Thunderheart replied. The galaxy is old and consciousness has taken forms you cannot imagine. But when the Void Hunters last came, it took all of us together to drive them back. Even then, we barely succeeded. Storm stepped forward, his young voice carrying new authority. This time will be different. This time we have Father and his people. Humans think differently, fight differently. You adapt and change faster than any species we've known. What do you mean? Marcus asked. The old races think in patterns that stretch across eons, Whisper explained. They are wise but slow to change. Humans think quickly. Improvise, find new solutions to old problems. That's why the dragons chose to ally with you. Why Father could raise us when our own people might have been too set in their ways. Marcus looked at his children with new understanding. This wasn't just about protecting the galaxy from an ancient threat. It was about proving that different species, different ways of thinking, could work together to solve problems that had seemed impossible. "Signal all ships," Admiral Rodriguez ordered. "Human Dragon and everyone else. We're forming a united fleet. If these Void Hunters want to fight, let's give them one they'll remember." As the massive fleet began to organize itself around the Stormheart, Marcus realized that his journey from lonely farmer to galactic father figure was far from over. The real test was just beginning, and the fate of consciousness itself hung in the balance. But looking at Storm and Whisper, at the alliance they had helped create, Marcus felt ready for whatever came next. His family had grown beyond anything he could have imagined, and together, they would face the darkness. The final battle took place in the space between galaxies, where reality itself grew thin and the laws of physics became suggestions rather than rules. Marcus stood in the command center of the largest joint fleet in galactic history, watching as thousands of ships from dozens of species prepared to face an enemy that had haunted the nightmares of ancient civilizations. The Void Hunters had changed their strategy since their first incursions. Instead of simply consuming the outer colonies, they were drawing energy from the very fabric of spacetime, growing stronger with each light year they conquered. The massive entity at the heart of their fleet, the Devourer, had grown to the size of a small moon, its gravitational pull beginning to distort the spiral arms of the galaxy itself. "All ships report ready," Admiral Rodriguez announced, her voice carrying across the multi-species communication network that the Dragons had helped establish. "Dragon Storm Riders are in position. Singer Harmony Weavers are synchronized. Crystal Mind logic chains are stable." Marcus marveled at how much had changed in just 1 year. What had started with 2 injured younglings in a ravine had grown into the greatest alliance in galactic history, and at the center of it all were his children, now recognized as bridges between species, translators not just of language but of thought itself. Storm had grown into his role as heir to the Thunder Crown, his natural leadership abilities enhanced by the unique perspective he'd gained from being raised by a human. He commanded the dragon forces with wisdom that impressed even the ancient council. Members Whisper had become something unprecedented, a dragon who could interface directly with other species' technology and consciousness. His ability to understand and translate between different forms of thought had made the alliance possible. The Crystal Minds, beings of pure silicon-based logic, could speak with the emotion-driven singers through Whisper's translations. "The enemy is moving," reported Captain Skyrender. "They're forming some kind of feeding formation around the Devourer." On the main display, the Void Hunter fleet was arranging itself in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Lines of dark energy began flowing between the ships, all converging on the massive central entity. "They're going to try to drain our ships before we can engage," Thunderheart realized. "The same tactic they used against the outer colonies." "Not if we don't let them," Marcus said, an idea forming. During his months with the Dragons, he'd learned to think in terms of energy and flow, rather than just ships and weapons. "What if we don't fight them the way they expect?" "What do you mean, Father?" Storm asked. Marcus turned to address the entire command staff, human, dragon, and alien alike. "Every time these Void Hunters have won, it's been because they drain the energy from their enemy's technology. But what if we give them more energy than they can handle?" The bridge fell silent as species-specific translation systems worked to convey his meaning. Then Whisper's eyes lit up with understanding. "Overload them," the young dragon breathed. "Instead of protecting our energy, we flood them with it." "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "Storm, can the dragons channel energy to specific targets?" "Yes, Father, but the amount needed would be enormous. We would have to link not just our fleet, but every dragon in the galaxy." Thunderheart's colors shifted to patterns Marcus had learned indicated rapid calculation. It could work, but it would require perfect coordination. And someone would have to get close enough to the Devourer to direct the energy precisely. "I'll do it," Marcus said simply. "Absolutely not," Storm and Whisper said simultaneously, their voices harmonizing in a way that made the air vibrate. "You're our father," Whisper continued. "We won't lose you to this." Marcus looked at his children. No longer the small, hurt creatures he'd found, but magnificent beings who had become bridges between worlds. "And you're my sons." "That's exactly why I have to do this." Before they could argue further, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. The Void Hunters were advancing, their drain fields extending toward the Allied ships like tendrils of living darkness. "All ships, this is Admiral Rodriguez," came the fleet-wide announcement. "Execute Plan Lightning. All energy sources to maximum output. Dragons, we need everything you've got." What happened next would be remembered in the histories of a dozen species as the moment the galaxy learned to fight as one. Every dragon in space linked their bioelectric fields, creating a network of power that spanned light years. The crystal mines contributed their computational abilities to calculate the precise targeting needed. The singers provided harmonic frequencies that enhanced the energy flow. Even the TCA's fusion reactors were pushed beyond their design limits. Marcus piloted a small, heavily shielded ship toward the heart of the Void Hunter formation. Storm and Whisper had insisted on coming with him. Their combined power needed to direct the massive energy flow that was building behind them. Approaching the Devourer, Marcus reported as they flew through space that was beginning to warp around the massive entity. "Its gravitational field is off the charts." "We can feel it, Father," Storm said, his voice strained as he channeled power from thousands of distant dragons. "It's trying to drain us, but we're giving it too much. It can't process this amount of energy." The Devourer loomed before them, a wound in reality that pulled at their minds as much as their ship. But instead of the usual hungry darkness, Marcus could see something new. Flickers of instability, points where the entity's form was beginning to fluctuate. "It's working," Whisper reported, his scales blazing as he fine-tuned the energy flow. "The creature is losing cohesion. But Father, we need to get closer." Marcus pushed their small ship into the Devourer's immediate vicinity, where space itself seemed to scream with tortured physics. The entity's attempts to drain their energy were creating feedback loops as the dragons pumped more power through the connection faster than it could be absorbed. "Now," Marcus shouted. Storm and Whisper released their combined power in a focused pulse that carried with it the energy of every dragon in the galaxy, amplified by the technology of a dozen species and directed by the tactical thinking that only humans seemed capable of. The Devourer didn't die. Entities like that were too fundamental to reality to simply cease existing. Instead, it imploded, collapsing back through the dimensional barriers it had crossed, dragging the entire Void Hunter fleet with it in a cascade of failing spacetime. When the distortions cleared, the space between galaxies was empty, except for the Allied fleet, hanging in stunned silence as they realized what they had accomplished. "All ships report status," Admiral Rodriguez finally managed to say. "Dragon forces intact," Storm reported, his voice weary but triumphant. "Human vessels operational," came the reply from the TCA ships. One by one, the other species confirmed their survival. They had done the impossible, not just survived an encounter with the Void Hunters, but actually defeated them. Marcus looked at his sons, both exhausted but glowing with pride and accomplishment. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it," Whisper corrected. "All of us together. Just like you taught us, Father." As the fleet began its journey home, Marcus reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. A year ago, he had been a lonely farmer who wanted nothing more than to be left alone. Now he was the father of dragon princes, a key figure in the greatest alliance in galactic history, and someone who had helped save consciousness itself from extinction. But as he watched Storm and Whisper planning improvements to interspecies cooperation protocols, he realized that the most important thing hadn't changed. He was still a father, raising his children to be better than himself, to build bridges where others saw only walls. The galaxy was safe, the alliance was strong, and his family was together. For a former soldier who had thought his family was lost forever, that was more than enough. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of kindness, and sometimes when you open your heart to those who need help, you discover that saving them has actually saved you. In the end, Marcus learned that being a father, whether to human children or dragon princes, was the most important job in the universe. Everything else was just details.